hoping to intimidate and terrorize. They will be opposed.
They took us to Gaza prison, where we have stayed for 4 days. We have not accepted that we will sign any papers that we want to be deported from Israel, because we believe that we have not entered Israel.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Maine to New York City. This is a photo from 1928 as the Klan marched in Washington, D.C. Now, with the Death Eaters in charge, Nazi-Klan types feel empowered. Nazis and Klan are coming to D.C. to celebrate their Charlottesville March and their murder of Heather Heyer. They're hoping to intimidate and terrorize. They will be opposed. Check out the website shutitdowndc.org. Block the alt-right. Stop the fascists. These are backpacks that had been given to Yemeni school children by UNICEF. They were taken from the bodies of the children on the school bus bombed on August 9th by Saudi forces using U.S. planes and U.S. air refueling and U.S. targeting guidance. These are the children before their school trip. 29 of them are now dead, along with 21 others. 2 tweets with a child injured in the bombing done in your name by our valiant allies, the Saudi princes. Mohammed al-Khayyam, he died on the bus. In other Saudi news, the princes have tossed out the Canadian ambassador to the kingdom because Canada had the nerve to criticize the Saudis for imprisoning their leading feminists. And Saudi dissident Ali Al-Ahmed complains about this tweet, which he says is a threat by a Saudi to 9/11 Canada. In Palestine, musicians play defiantly at the Saeed al-Mishal Cultural Center building in Gaza the day after the Israelis blew up the 5-story building. This is a photo from August 10th. It's the 20th Friday in a row masses of people came out in Gaza for the Great March of Return movement. The last Freedom Flotilla heroes who were captured by Israeli forces have been thrown out of occupied Palestine, Israel. They were aboard the Swedish boat Freedom. This is audio of an interview with Ellen Hansson.
Hi, my name is Ellen Hansson, and I have just been deported from Israel against my will. On the 3rd of August, we were captured on international waters, 37 nautical miles from Gaza. It was a show-off takeover of our boats. There was approximately 12 boats filled with soldiers from the military. We had a completely non-violence strategy on our boat Freedom. We were basically sitting in the cockpit with our hands open and didn't do any resistance. The soldiers came and demanded us to surrender to them as we were about to break the blockaded area of Gaza. We refused, as we see that our rights on international waters is to sail all the way to Gaza with our boats and our medical equipment, which is to be handed over to the people of Gaza. There's nothing illegal about that. We were captured against our will, we were hijacked, and we were kidnapped to Ashdod where the whole port was filled with Israeli military who took us in and tried to make us agree to the fact that we had entered Israel illegally. After many hours, so the whole capture took about 7 hours. We hadn't been sleeping for days. Our journey from Sicily to reach Gaza had taken about 12 days. We were all very tired, but our engine had broke, so we were actually only sailing, which in itself was a very dangerous situation to be captured on. Our boat is not made to be captured and taken in that speed. They also put a rope to one of their military boats and took us to Ashdod in approximately 16 knots, which is very, very, very dangerous. One of the lines broke once, so they had to do this whole thing again. By that time they had split us up, women and men, and did this whole very propaganda, nice, kind way of taking us over. When we were approached, there was an officer that came up with a Zodiac calling us saying, "Hello, my name is Netta, we come in peace. If you don't resist, we will take you to Ashdod." The whole procedure in Ashdod was a fucking joke, excuse me, but you know, we're 12 peaceful activists. They put the whole military force to deal with us. Then they took us to Givon prison, where we have stayed for 4 days. We have not accepted that we will sign any papers that we want to be deported from Israel, because we believe that we have not entered Israel by our own wills. I myself have said, if you want to deport me somewhere, you can deport me to Gaza, because that was where I was headed. And as a Swedish citizen, I see that I have the full rights on international waters to sail to Gaza. In prison, they have tried different strategies on us. Mostly they have tricked us, lied to us several times, over and over again. I've been deprived of my legal rights to see my lawyer, to see my embassy, to make the phone calls, and to go to the court hearing. I had a court hearing today around this time, which I have the legal rights to have. I have not been able to see my lawyer. The prison guards, the prison managers, whatever people there has been in the prison, has told me that my lawyer does not want to see me. So I see that I have been captured, I have been kidnapped against my will, I have not been given my legal rights, and I will press charges against the state of Israel that has done all of this to me. And you know, in the end of the day, we're peaceful activists who work in solidarity of the people of Gaza. We have nothing to hide, we're not dangerous, we don't carry any weapons. The only cargo we've had this time is medical equipment that was going to be given to my care of Gaza. And we see that we have no other choice than continue this work for solidarity, for peace, for basic human rights to the people of Gaza that has the same rights as anyone in this whole world, to the basic human rights. So watch out, we're going to continue sail until this blockade is lifted, and we will continue and continue and continue until the people of Gaza will be free and will have all the justice and basic human rights.
Thank you very much.
One aspect that is almost never reported is the Israeli theft of supplies and money from people on these boats to Gaza. There were 116 boxes of medical supplies on board the two boats. None of it has reached Gaza. Passengers had thousands of dollars of money and electronics taken by their Israeli captors. Was any of it returned, or was it just looted, like the property of the passengers in 2010? Now, as California suffers its largest fire in history, climate scientist Michael Mann and Michael Brune of the Sierra Club speak on Democracy Now!
For more, we go to Oakland, California, where we're joined by Sierra Club Executive Director Michael Brune. This week, he wrote a piece headlined, Jerry Brown's Last Challenge. Also joining us, Michael Mann, Distinguished Professor of Atmospheric Science at Penn State University, author of The Madhouse Effect, How Climate Change Denial is Threatening Our Planet, Destroying Our Politics, and Driving Us Crazy. Welcome you both to Democracy Now! Dr. Mann, I want to begin with you. The corporate media is covering the fires in California constantly, and that's very important. But what is rarely mentioned in any of these reports is the connection between the fires and climate change. Can you explain what that connection is? What is happening right now in California?
Sure thing. And in fact, some of the networks have started to connect the dots when it comes to climate change and the role that it's playing with these wildfires. NBC Nightly News the other night did have a segment where they did make that connection. Well, you know, it's not rocket science, okay? You know, you warm up the planet, you're going to get more intense and longer heat waves. You're going to get drier soils because that heat is baking the soil, it's baking the surface of the earth. So you've got hotter temperatures, you've got drier soils, you've got less winter snowpack. There's less snow falling in the winter in the Sierra Mountains, and the storms are getting diverted north of California. And we think that that jet stream behavior itself may have a climate change connection. So you put that all together and you sort of have a perfect storm of consequences when it comes to wildfire. You've got all the ingredients coming together, and so it's not a surprise that we are seeing these record wildfires in California, in the Arctic, around the Northern Hemisphere this summer as a consequence of heat and drought caused by human-caused climate change.
Well, on Sunday, just hours after the Trump administration declared the California wildfires a major disaster, President Trump tweeted, quote, "California wildfires are being magnified and made so much worse by the bad environmental laws which aren't allowing massive amounts of readily available water to be properly utilized. It's being diverted into the Pacific Ocean. Must also tree clear to stop fire spreading," he wrote. Then on Monday, he tweeted again, Trump tweeted again, quote, "Governor Jerry Brown must allow the free flow of the vast amounts of water coming from the north and foolishly being diverted into the Pacific Ocean can be used for fires, farming, and everything else. Think of California with plenty of water. Nice. Fast federal government approvals." So that those were Trump's tweets. Dr. Mann, could you respond to that?
Yeah, well, you know, this is unfortunately the sort of diversion that we've often seen from the president, misdirection, because the irony here, of course, is that what we're seeing has nothing to do with environmental regulations. In fact, it's Trump's effort to eliminate environmental regulations and policies to act on climate change, which are putting us in a precarious position. These wildfires will only get worse as we continue to warm the planet by burning fossil fuels and increasing the concentration of these warming greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And the Trump administration is doing everything it can to scuttle international efforts and domestic efforts to act on climate.
And Michael Brune, could you talk about the state-level response to these wildfires? What has Governor Jerry Brown's response been, and what do you think can happen at the state level, given the Trump administration's response?
Well, there's really two parts to that question. First is, what is the state doing to help to control these wildfires and respond to some of the life-threatening fires that we're seeing across the state? And the response really has been impressive. There are more than 15,000 firefighters putting their lives on the line. There are thousands of families and homes and schools and businesses that are under threat, and the response has been impressive. The firefighters have all the water that they need. What they need is some support, and they need some respect coming from the president and people in the administration. But the response has been heroic, very brave, and frankly, it's been impressive to see the way in which people have come together to fight this challenge. In this fire season, in the last several fire seasons as well. These fires are happening in the context of a big debate here in California about climate policy. And there are two policies that are being debated. One is the fact that you highlighted at the beginning of the show, which is that Governor Brune, even though he's been a great leader on promoting energy efficiency and solar power and beginning to take cars off the road and move to electric vehicles, under his watch, more than 20,000 new wells and drilling permits have been issued. The state is expanding oil production in the state, even as they're scaling up clean energy. And so the Sierra Club and hundreds of other organizations and scientists are calling for Jerry Brown to begin a managed phase-out of fossil fuels, reasonably, thoughtfully, over time, to respond to this climate crisis. And then at the same time, there's also a debate in the state legislature to move the entire state, which is the 5th largest economy in the world, all the way to 100% clean energy. San Diego has committed to go to 100% clean energy. San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, large parts of the state at the city level have committed to move to 100% clean energy. We're looking to see the whole state get off of all coal, all gas, all fossil fuels, and move to 100% clean energy as quickly as possible over the coming years.
So, Michael Brune, you began your piece by saying, let me just find it because, well, you can tell us how you began your piece. If Donald Trump could take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere as efficiently as he sucks oxygen out of the news cycle, the climate crisis would be solved faster than you can say Mexico will pay for that wall. And you go on to say, unfortunately, even as we deal with the Trump administration's daily cascade of corruption, crudeness, and cruelty, the clock keeps ticking and climate pollution keeps rising. But the math is merciless. If we don't accelerate a phase out of fossil fuels, then the wildfires, droughts, and extreme weather events currently plaguing the planet will seem mild compared with what's coming. Yet, you have, as the fires are gaining intensity in California, the Environmental Protection Agency, now under the former coal lobbyist Andrew Wheeler, who's replaced the corrupt Scott Pruitt, who you really helped to tank, certainly, your organization, the Sierra Club, by exposing a lot of what he was doing. The EPA announced last week it's going to freeze Obama-era fuel economy standards at 2020 levels in the latest blow by the Trump administration against efforts to curb catastrophic climate change. Can you talk about what it is Wheeler is doing?
Sure. Well, let me just add one word to what you said. The EPA will try to freeze the U.S. auto efficiency at current levels, or at 2020 levels. We will fight them, and dozens of other groups will fight them as well, both in the courts and in the marketplace. One of the best things that the Obama administration did on climate change, probably the best thing that the administration did on climate change, was to work with the auto industry, to work with states across the country, to work with unions, to increase the fuel efficiency and increase an acceleration towards electric vehicles so that we could save money at the pump, we could save a lot of oil, we could import a lot less oil, and reduce climate pollution. So, of course, the Trump administration is opposed to that and is seeking not only to roll back those protections, roll back all of those savings, but also, crucially, to eliminate the ability for the state of California and then other states to fight for clean air and to work with the auto industry directly in order to reduce emissions from cars and trucks and SUVs. So this is something that is being challenged by states' attorney general across the country. It's being challenged by groups like the Sierra Club and many others. We're going to prevail. We're going to make sure that these rules are protected. But it's one more fight that we have with the Trump administration, which is taking us backwards when we need to be moving very quickly in the opposite direction.
Well, Michael Mann, one of the causes that you've pointed to for these extreme weather events that we're seeing today are changes in the jet stream. Could you explain what the jet stream is and how it's changing and why?
Sure thing. So the basic factors are easy to understand here. Hotter temperatures, drier soils, less runoff, less water running off from the Sierra Mountains. Obviously, those create the conditions conducive to these wildfires. But there is this other ingredient that we think is involved here and in this whole array of unprecedented extreme summer weather events that we are seeing over the past month around the entire northern hemisphere. Unprecedented floods, droughts, heat waves, wildfires. And what's happening here is that these weather systems are not moving along the way they normally do. The jet stream is this band of strong winds that blow from west to east, and if you're flying in a jet, it's faster flying from west to east across the United States than in the other direction because you've got that tailwind. That's the jet stream. The jet stream also pushes weather systems from west to east. And what's happening as we melt the sea ice in the Arctic, believe it or not, what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. That warming in the Arctic is actually changing temperature patterns in the atmosphere in a way that slows down the jet stream. The jet stream is actually driven by the contrast in temperature from the warm equator to the cold polar regions. When you decrease that contrast by warming the poles more than the rest of the planet, you slow down the jet stream. Now, there are other physical processes that are involved, but that's really the key process here. And so you have these large meanders in the jet stream. You see the jet stream really wiggling vigorously north and south, and that gives you extreme weather events. But the added ingredient here is that the jet stream isn't moving along. It's not pushing those weather systems along. So the same locations get rained on day after day or get baked by the sun day after day. And that's when you see unprecedented extreme weather events like what we're seeing around the northern hemisphere this summer. The impacts of climate change are no longer subtle. We are seeing them play out this summer in real time on our television screens.
Can you talk about the hothouse state? Yesterday, a group of leading scientists warning the cascading effects of melting ice, warming seas, shifting currents, and dying forests could push the planet into a hothouse state. Michael Mann.
Yeah, so that article, it's more of a commentary than an original research article. You know, the basic science that's discussed there is science we've understood for some time. James Hansen, the former director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, made this point a number of years ago, that if we keep CO2 levels elevated, even at current levels, and we allow the climate system to equilibrate to those high levels of CO2, then over many centuries, we lose the ice sheets. Forests start to migrate. We fundamentally remake the planet, and it turns out that can add a whole lot of extra warming. And that isn't always taken into account in these projections you see of the warming we can expect over the next century or so. There's this longer-term commitment. Much of that CO2 that we've put into the atmosphere is going to remain in the atmosphere for thousands of years. And if we keep that CO2 elevated at levels they are now or even higher than they are now, then we could see major disruptions in the climate. Again, the science there isn't new, but it's important. And what it tells us is not only do we have to cut our emissions dramatically to avoid warming the planet more than catastrophic 2 degrees Celsius, 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit. We can still do that. Paris will get us halfway there. We have to improve on Paris to get all the way there. We can do that. But it isn't enough just to level off those CO2 concentrations. Ultimately, we're going to have to pull that CO2 back out of the atmosphere. If we leave it at current levels for centuries, we will commit potentially to catastrophic changes in our climate.
Well, you said, Michael Mann, that if emissions are not reduced, we'll witness major disruptions in the climate. Would you not describe what's happening now as a major disruption? And if not, then what do you anticipate happening?
Yeah, so too often, we allow the problem of climate change to be framed as if there's some tipping point. There's a certain amount of warming that we go beyond, and then, we suddenly have a calamity on our hands. It's much more like a minefield. We're walking out onto this minefield already, and we're starting to set off some of those mines. But what we know is the further we walk out onto that minefield, the more of those mines we are going to set off. So the only sensible strategy is to stop moving forward out onto the minefield. We've got to go back to where we came from. We've got to bring those carbon emissions down. Again, the Paris Accord gets us about halfway to where we need to be to stave off the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. But we're already seeing dangerous climate change now. If you talk to people in California, if you talk to the people of Puerto Rico, people in Europe, people all around the world, in many respects, dangerous climate change is already starting to arrive. We're on this highway, this carbon highway, and we have to get off at the next available exit.
As we wrap up, Michael Brune, Governor Brown is going to be holding this Global Climate Action Summit in September in San Francisco, and there's going to be a counter summit as well. What are you demanding? What are you saying is most important he do right now? And what about these protests? For example, the young people, 6 of them arrested at his office doing a sit-in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking the question. Well, the summit really is well timed. I'm calling in from Oakland this morning. You can see the fires here in the Bay Area. You can see the smoke from the fires in the Bay Area, even though the fires are a couple hours to the north and to the east of the city. What we need from Jerry Brown here in the state and leaders across the country and around the world, but what we particularly need from Jerry Brown is a managed phase out, a thoughtful and reasonable managed phase out of fossil fuel production here in the state.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.